Hey guys, it's Dr. Sean over the Center Path, and we're going to talk more about some of the mental issues that can happen and mental health challenges that can occur when someone has adopted meditation as a practice or mindfulness as a practice. So the main one we're going to talk about is what's called Zen sickness. Now, in around the 1700s, Hakuin Ikaku actually was a monk who was having a thing called Zen sickness, and he was freaking out a little bit. And we're going to go over step by step each of the symptoms that he had and what the other differential diagnoses could be with that kind of thing. Now, if you look into that, there's a whole range of things that he was going through when he was explaining his Zen sickness, as it were. And the number one was, well, we're going to just kind of go down the line from the head, working our way down. He said his head was burning, okay, and there was too much heat rising up too fast. In acupuncture theory or traditional Chinese medicine, that's an increase of the yang, of the kind of liver yang, give you headaches, burning and watery eyes, which is also what he had. So he had that burning sensation of his head, red ears, perhaps, maybe flushed face, watery, burning eyes, maybe coldness in other parts of his body. These are signs of sleep deprivation is what they are. They're also signs of over worry and also of you could say a psychotic break, but let's not get into that. That's a whole other ball of wax because that's kind of like the end zone of all of this stuff. And if we're getting into some of these, we're feeling that tunnel vision, that warm feeling, a sleeplessness, but we need to sleep. And when we do sleep, we have a lot of weird dreams and things like that, which is one of the things that he did, Hakuin actually had in his symptomology. Other ones too, ringing in ears, photophobia, which is fear of light, actually. Light bothers his eyes. Heliophobia, which is the sun. So he like had problems with the sun. He felt like he was burning or whatever. Now these can be really extrapolated, interpolated to a lot of other things, but really they do all lead back to that fatigue, mental fatigue, and also just fatigue of staying up too much. If you've ever stayed up and watched a whole bunch of movies or something like that, and then tried to go to work the next day, your face feels hot, your ears feel hot, your eyes burn and itch, and there's tearing and all these kind of things. So we could say it's something as simple as fatigue. Right? Nyctophobia and heliophobia. Heliophobia, fear of the sun. Nyctophobia, fear of the dark. So he felt really, really sad when he was in the dark. And one of the things that occurs with this, if we're looking at traditional Chinese medicine again, acupuncture theory and some of the more energetic stuff, is we're looking at too much energy went in and none was coming back out. This also displayed in his, when he would sleep, he'd have really vivid and bad dreams. That's a typical sign of this. Also, he'd get what's called nocturnal emissions. So he'd have like semen leak out of it, or he'd get an erection and ejaculate and whatever when he was asleep. Now, those are signs of a lot of internal energy. The energy is too far in, it's not getting out. Now, this is a typical thing with people who are trying to stop everything and meditate very hard. They're putting too much energy inside. And that can cause you to feel depersonalized or derealized. And we'll get into those. Those are separate. Those are actually full diagnoses, which we'll get into in a total other video. But those are part of this whole thing. Other things he was feeling was restlessness, of course, jitteriness and nervousness, brain fog, and sadness. Other issues, he was having digestive issues. Now, these are all stress-related disorders, okay? And the stress-related disorder in this case was he was working very hard on trying to achieve realization or trying to achieve ultimate bliss and do things really right. So he was really getting a little neurotic about his activity and his actions as he was working. And that caused him to mull over and almost fold over his whole psyche into itself. And that can cause problems. And it can cause problems with us too. I recently went through an entire, like a month of weird symptoms, very similar to these now that I look back at it. I was having very vivid dreams, very weird, like heat issues where I couldn't get warm even if I put clothes on. Everybody else in the house seemed comfortable when usually they were cold and I was too hot. I was cold and they were just comfortable, which was very weird. And I'd get tingliness in my fingers and be very agitated, almost in a brain fog, focus, my vision kind of tunnel visioned in there. That's a very typical one. I would get the burning eyes, not really ringing in my ears, but you get kind of like almost you had like cotton balls in your ears, like you couldn't hear real well, and everything seemed further away, and time seemed to have slowed down. So these are all in the same realm of that, based on stress. So what you want to eat when you're uh, uh, not hungry. You know, you're bored eating, and then when you're hungry, you don't want to eat. So it's this weird thing. When you're trying to sleep, you can't sleep, and when you're trying to stay awake, you can't stay awake. So these are all fatigue and stress issues, and this is an imbalance of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, the yin and the yang. So when these two things can't harmonize, our bodies are trying to adjust to these on the inside. We're going to use up way more minerals, way more water, way more nutrients, and we may even start losing weight. Okay, so these are simple things that we can, first we have to recognize this as a problem. And sometimes it's like, I just don't feel good. I feel achy all the time. I feel like I'm almost going to have the flu. That's a very typical, very similar to the symptoms that he discusses. Now, in some other literature, they're saying, oh, maybe he had MS, or maybe he had tuberculosis, or perhaps he had dysentery or something like that. There's really no evidence in looking at those that he had any kind of organic, like, bug, for example. He didn't have like tuberculosis. He didn't have, which was called scrofula, or called consumption in those days. He didn't display those, or leprosy, or something that was kind of common, or the plague, or something like this. One, because he lived. He was around 25, so he was a young guy. This is when psychological disorders show up in people between about 16 and late 30s or so, and then it kind of fades off from there. But he had to do something about it, okay? And he was really kind of losing his ability to, see the world as it was and be a functional person. So he did meet with that old, some ascetic Chinese, monk or something like that, who told him to do the meditation of the butter on his head, which is basically, if you think about it, doing a body scan. That's what he did. He did a body scan. So if you're having any of those symptoms, start with your body scan. And then two, the main thing, get some sleep. Sleep, if you look at other masters, there's Master Han Shen, who was a poet, and then there was also Fu Kang, I think, Fu Kuang were different Taoist and Chinese monks that had the similar symptoms with too much work and too much practice. You can obviously do too much physical labor and you're going to be sore, right? Or you strain something, or that can make you sick. Right, actually sick, and then your immune system drops, and then you catch something. That's a possibility. Same thing if we're doing mental work, okay, or philosophical or psychological or spiritual work. These can all cause those kind of problems. So we have to have what we call the center path, or a middle road, right? Is not too much and not too little. And in that process, we need to learn to recognize when we're having these. A lot of new articles are out and things of people who started a meditation retreat, which I don't suggest. If you're new to it, don't do a big retreat. Do a couple days with some breaks. You don't do like from having your phone all the time and having the television on and having other people around, to going to solitude and darkness and no electronics like that for an extended period of time, like more than a couple days. I don't think is good for you early on. I've done some longer retreats and mid-level retreats. I've never done anything like a 3-month or something like that, because I have too many other things to do. I don't see great use. I mean, for some of you, it's going to be the greatest thing ever. But it has to be tempered with some activity, some work. Even in Zen Buddhism, we'll do sitting, just kind of a sitting meditation, and then you do walking meditation. You move around, and then you go and you eat, and then you stand up and move around again, and maybe do some cleaning. That has to happen in that process, and especially these days, we have to have a little bit different input and a different processing. So we need to recognize those things first, then get into it. The people who are writing most of the articles about the darkness of meditation and evil meditation, stuff like that, tend to be people who jumped in and jumped deep and then weren't prepared in one way or another. If they really honestly look at themselves, they had some other issues previous. Now, what are those other issues? That's where we get into depersonalization and derealization. And many times those have to do with trauma and stress and PTSD and violence and even perceived violence, actual violence, verbal violence, physical violence. All of these kind of things can change, or tremendous loss, okay, or sense of tremendous loss. These things, when kind of let go, can fold back in on yourself and cause problems. So when you're doing meditation, do it in steps. Don't forget to take your breaks. Drink your water. Have some juice. He could have had maybe, we look back at this, he could have had diabetes, because we look at the fatigue and all these other weird things. He could have been hypoglycemic. That's a possibility. Because one, diabetes is also called the great mimicker, because you can see a lot of different things. He could have had thyroid problems. That's another one. He could have had maybe adrenal issues, where he was so stressed out and kind of burned out his adrenals and then messed up his thyroid, and that screws with everything. So let's look at those kind of things when you're doing your own meditations. Don't forget to subscribe to this, because we're going to do way more. We're going to get into depersonalization, derealization, and some other issues that people come across with meditation. I've been teaching meditation for over 15 years, and I've been working with almost exclusively people that have pain, physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain, psychological pain, spiritual pain. And that's the majority of things we do. It hasn't been all for fun. And it hasn't been all just because people want to try it for a little bit of stress. These people are like almost pathologically stressed out. And a lot of them are medicated, have been medicated. Some of them self-medicate. Some of them self-medicate with things that are non-prescription, or they self-medicate with things that are prescription. And that can mess up your chemistry. And we need to appreciate that when we're taking on something like Buddhism and meditation. You can't have Buddhism without all of the ethical and spiritual and psychological training that goes with it. You just can't sit around. Your brain's going to turn on itself and turn on you. So anyway, this is Dr. Sean over the Center Path. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're going to go over more of each of these symptoms. I don't think that it was the tuberculosis or anything like that. I think he had a stress reaction. And looking more and more into it, even reading Wild Ivy and going through some of these other things, he definitely was suffering from that. There's no other magical, discussion based on that, really. Even if you look in the sutras, they do talk about problems with prolonged meditation and problems with the wrong kinds of meditation for the wrong person. Because remember, in Buddhism, we're trying to teach people based on their ability to learn. So anyway, this is Reverend Sean over the Center Path, Dr. Sean, and I hope you guys are doing well. Let me know how you're doing if you've ever had anything like this. I did another video on, which I'll try to put up here, over here. I did it on Zen sickness itself, and really went through each of his symptoms and each of the other symptoms. We'll go over depersonalization and stuff like that later. That's kind of a big, sticky, hairy project. And it's nothing, having these sensations is nothing to be afraid of. I think it's something to use as a tune, like tuning in. If you're working and your back starts hurting, stop working. If you're meditating and your mind starts hurting, stop meditating for a little bit. Do something else. Ping pong, dig a hole, do something else. We need to realize that it's not a panacea, which means it cures everything. And it's not a total placebo, and it's not a nocebo, which means it can hurt everything, or a placebo makes it all placid and good. It's not like that. Meditation is a tool and a practice that needs to be practiced. Anyway, talk to you guys later. I'll see you on the rebound. Take care.